My name is Dominique Avery. I'm delighted to welcome you to Can We Talk, a show which gives me an opportunity to have a wide-ranging conversation with just one interesting Simsbury resident. Today my guest is not a Simsbury resident, but nevertheless has devoted almost 3 decades here at SCTV to keep Simsbury informed. Her name is Karen Handville, and since 2005, she's been the SCTV station manager. You may recognize Karen as the host of Headlines, but she's usually behind the scenes, and this may be the very first time she's been interviewed in depth on TV. Karen, am I right?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Do you feel weird?
Yeah, I feel a little weird. Usually it's, I'll take care of what goes on behind the cameras, and you can take care of what goes on in front of the cameras.
So the reason we're doing this today is that you are leaving the station. And you've been so important behind the scenes for so long, we wanted to acknowledge the moment. And after so many years, I'm wondering whether you can share with us what you're going to be doing and why you're leaving, so people can know.
Sure. I'm leaving mainly for personal reasons at this point in my life. I'd like to have less work time in my life and more free time in my life. And so I'm leaving for a part-time job close to home at a local church that was needing to fill in their office manager, office administrator person's position after somebody was there for 16 years and left. And so my husband and I had been involved doing some audio-visual stuff for the church for the last year and a half or so since the whole COVID stuff started. And so I was lucky enough to see that they were looking for somebody, and I thought this was a good job for me and a good time to make a change. My husband's been retired now for about a year and a half, and so it seems like the right thing to do.
So, of course, we're going to miss you, and we really want to acknowledge all the things that you have meant to SCTV, which is why we want you to talk a little bit about yourself. But let me go back a little bit. What brought you to SCTV in the first place, and what year was that?
I think it was somewhere around 1995. I was home raising my children. I was not working. I read in the Granby Drummer that they were looking for people in Granby for their channel to produce programming. So I inquired, and I went to the training that they had in the Enfield station, which was where public access was for Granby at that time. And I sort of got tired of driving to Enfield all the time. So I said, what do they got going on in Simsbury? And so I came down here. I spoke to Gary Rosansky, was the station manager at the time. And he put me to work.
So I actually think it was in 1994 because I went back in my records.
Okay.
And the first time I met you was, or maybe I didn't meet you, but I met your video, was when I was preparing a half-hour show on Septemberfest. I did publicity for the Chamber of Commerce that year. And I found the other day, I was looking through these notes, Karen's, I went through audio, the video that you shot, and it always said Karen's this and Karen that, and something about what you told me, what you had filmed, et cetera.
Right.
And so that was 94.
Okay.
You shot the stuff in 94. I was there in 95, so I can actually pinpoint it. But I think that I've heard that your area of expertise had nothing to do with media or technology. What did you study?
In college, I was an environmental earth science major. If I had studied anything in this technology at that time, it would all be obsolete anyway. When I first came here, we were essentially recording in half-inch VHS tape, half-inch tape. And at this point, of course, everything is digital. And so we made the transition over time from the half-inch tape to mini DV tape to DVDs and to digital files.
So did you find your scientific background at all helpful? I mean, did it make you less fearful of all the technology that you were meeting?
Probably not what I went to school for. There are certain things that I ended up doing which were a little unusual at the time. I mean, when I was in high school, I remember having my own component stereo system. And of course, I had to take it apart and bring it with me to college and then bring it home again and then back to college. And so, you're taking apart, putting back together. In and of itself, that's nothing really extraordinary, but it made me comfortable with the concepts of electronics and
Let me compare you to myself. When I first started in this business, I was a reporter, and the first thing, I wasn't a reporter yet. I was working in a newsroom, and the first reporting I did was they handed me a tape recorder and said, "Go to this Ralph Nader news conference." I didn't know how to turn on a tape recorder, so you were 100 steps ahead of me. So you must have had an interest in technology.
Actually, if I went back to junior high school, I remember getting a reel-to-reel tape recorder at that time. And I couldn't have been more thrilled to death. It was something that we played around with. I mean, again, it was just audio. I remember doing some video camera work when I was in high school for a group project that we did. I ended up being the camera operator. I remember really enjoying it. I remember just remembering it. And so I suppose in a way, later on then getting a video camera when my children were first born and doing some of that. But, you didn't have any training at that point. So, your home videos are
But it was
horrible.
It sounds to me like it was in your blood.
It must have been without kind of realizing it, I suppose. I mean, I don't have another creative outlet. I'm not a musician. I don't make art. So I suppose this was, to a certain degree, my little spot for creativity.
Which is it's interesting.
It's
interesting how this happened for you.
And I did a lot of videos for, of course, my children, and then especially then once they were in school and doing things on stage, whether it was a choral concert or a play, something in drama. I usually did all of the video recording for that. And then once nonlinear editing became a thing, editing on a computer with digital files, and that was just, okay, I've completely lost track of time. I've been working on this for hours, and days could go by, and it's like, this is just fun. I just really like this.
So the stuff that you were doing with SCTV under Gary Rosansky, who was then the station manager, appealed to that side of you. Then Gary left. And then what happened? What made you?
Well, Gary got ill, and I just held down the fort for a while. I was only working part-time at that point. And luckily, I had been inquisitive enough to ask him, how does this work? How does this work? Because you have 3 channels that you are playing programming out on, and that was all new to me. So I would pick his brain when he was here and ask him how things were run. So when he left, that was completely unexpected. We didn't know he wasn't going to come back. I held down the fort for a while, and then at that point in time, my children were old enough where I could take a full-time job at that time, and so I went into the position at that point.
So that was the more creative side of you. This is public access television, and that means a whole lot of other things. First of all, I don't think most of the audience really knows what it is and how it started, and was that tough learning about sort of that part of the management side? And well, tell us what public access is and what makes Simsbury unique in the public access world.
Well, you could do a whole show about public access, but I mean, generally speaking, you're talking about public educational and government channels that are local to a community. It could be, as you said, Simsbury is very lucky. You have the station that has the 3 channels for just this one town. For example, in Granby, it's a regional area, and the public access station is actually run by the cable company. And the attitude is a little bit different. I mean, I remember turning on my television and there was never anything airing, just ugly community calendar notices. And so when I was working down here, I definitely had in my head that, no, there needs to be something on the channel most of the time. You need to have notices that are readable. But yes, so it's different in different parts of the state. It's different in different parts of the country.
It's different in the Valley. Avon is part of Nutmeg TV, which has, 11 towns or something?
Yeah, it's quite large. It's a regional station. I mean, again, they get much more funding because it's based on the number of households, the number of cable subscribers in your area. That's how the funding is driven.
So they have a fancier TV station than we do.
They do. Yeah, they do.
But one thing, I mean, it's totally a total surprise, but under COVID, when the only thing that was between the people of Simsbury and their government was us. And everything that the town did, all the Zoom meetings, everything, are on SCTV, on TV, and also on the internet. And that was, as far as I'm concerned, a huge deal for Simsbury, that Simsbury residents could keep track of. Maybe they didn't, but they could have.
I did hear one comment from Town Hall early on that was, there seems to be more participation in town government since we started streaming every meeting that the town had. I know that was a requirement as far as the state was concerned in order to have a legal meeting. And so yes, during COVID, we definitely went into the mode of town meetings and pretty much nothing else. People stayed home. People didn't come out and produce programming. There weren't activities around town. There were no, gatherings. So there was a lot of stuff that just, we didn't have any programming. We can share programming with other access stations, so it's not like we didn't have anything on the air. But yes, lots of town meetings. I think over 400 and something since COVID started.
That's amazing. I wonder how many Avon meetings were made public. Right. So you touched on funding being an issue, and clearly this station operates a little bit on a shoestring. Where does money come from?
So the base funding for the station, it comes from cable subscribers. Each year, the state of Connecticut sets that per subscriber rate, and it's not even $9 a year, not even a month, $9 a year per household that comes to the station to help. But we're a 501c3, and so we can do fundraising and grant writing and in-kind support. I mean, sometimes people donate things to us, but we did get a whole bunch of new equipment over COVID time. The state had opened up their PEGPESHA funding, and we had applied, and we ended up receiving a lot of new equipment, a lot of it that hasn't been even used yet by volunteers, because we just are hoping to finally get back up and cranking out things again. I just hope.
So you touched earlier, you talked about how technology has changed since 1994. How has that been to deal with, it sounds to me, learning a little bit more about you, that you were well positioned to go with the flow. I'm a dinosaur. I would never have been able to do that. So can you trace a little bit all the different things technology things that we've been through in those years?
Well, before I got here and was active, there was 3/4 inch tape that was.
I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they were quite large,
Yeah.
and maybe only 20 minutes worth of recording time on them. I mean, it was nice to get rid of that, and oh gosh, okay, 1/2-inch tape, that's so much better. And then so my one story that I will never forget for the rest of my life, we had gone from our Playback system, which was a whole rack of VHS decks that you would put a tape in, and originally it was press play. And then we got an automated system where you put the little electric eye onto each of the decks, and then you could schedule a little programming thing that said, okay, at such and such a time, deck 3 plays, and at such and such a time, another deck. Then we went to a digital playback system. It was an expensive system that we purchased, and I will never forget the day that we installed that. I was in a complete panic because this was a huge change of how we were going to be
Broadcasting.
on the air,
Yeah.
how we were going to be on the air. And so you had a whole pile of DVD players that have now been taken out of the racks, sitting in a pile on the floor, and all you had was this one rack-mounted piece of equipment, a computer, essentially, that was going to do this. And it was new, and I'm here essentially by myself with the guy who was doing the installation, and looking at this pile of decks and thinking to myself, if this doesn't work, we're completely off the air, up the creek, and it's all my fault. And I was in a panic. It ended up working out just fine, but I think that first day, I probably took a couple of years off of my life on that one. I was completely freaked out.
So you were first broadcasting on this very large tape. Then you got progressively smaller, and you no longer had to press buttons. The computer was pressing the buttons as to what was going to hear. What kind of stuff was airing at the time? What does SCTV broadcast besides what we learned, what we broadcast during COVID, which was town meetings? What kind of programming, and where does the programming come from?
Well, most of the stuff that we were airing were all programs produced in Simsbury. I mean, occasionally we were, getting an outside program from another station, but I mean, they were exercise programs, they were how-to programs, they were interview programs, they were events that were happening around town, sports. We're trying to do a bit more of sports again. Since they started to have sports at school.
And so did people come to you with an idea and say, I'd like to do a show, or did any of the ideas come from you?
I do remember one idea that came from me. I was speaking with somebody at a chamber meeting, and he had been doing a call-in radio talk program, like a self-help program. And I said, well, would you consider setting up the camera and recording yourself while you're doing it?
So that he aired his radio programs.
Essentially. And it was something he had never considered. And he's still doing it.
So the one thing that SCTV has not done, because I think no one has stepped forward, I did it once, election results.
I knew it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it had been done in the past, and I say sort of before I got involved, but there were so many people involved because you needed to have people that were at the polls and that were bringing information, and then you need to have people that are going to be on the air doing commentary, and then you needed to take a break from that. So
it's complicated.
It was complicated, right. And we just don't have the crew here to be able to do that. Do remember, yes, doing it one year.
It was a primary, and I think we had three people who were broadcasting, and then reporters who called in from the various election sites with the results, and then the victors and the people who lost came afterwards for interviews. I did it once. It's a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work.
But useful.
Well, but what we moved into, instead of doing the beforehand results kind of thing, is meet the candidates.
Right.
So more of a, help the voter decide, or let them
Right.
know who their candidates are. So we have done that now for a number of years. And I hope that is helpful. I mean, I know how I feel going home and saying, okay, well, now I have to go and vote. I didn't get that with any of the candidates that I have to vote for. So I think it's helpful.
So we've talked a lot about technology. Now there are fewer and fewer people who are actually watching us on TV. So we have started broadcasting online. How did that come about?
Before we used YouTube, we used another service called Blip TV, and they changed their terms of service, and so we got kicked off. We started to do that to make the programming, our programming, not everything that we air, but the stuff that we produce, put it on a website. And I think because websites were mandatory, that was one of the things we just needed to develop. And one of the things that you're going to put on your website are all your videos. We can't afford to pay for our own hosting platform. So we are using YouTube.
But you now can go live from the library, for instance.
Yes. So we have Mark Orenstein to thank for much of the newer technologies that we have
So
put
a
in
volunteer.
place. A volunteer, yeah. Volunteers are hugely important. We need them.
Yeah, so that was another thing I wanted to talk about as long as we're on the air. Who comes to SCTV and how do you locate these people who might be interested? That's tough, right?
It is. It's very difficult. A lot of people are very reluctant to be on camera. A lot of people are reluctant to learn how to run a camera or learn how to do a multi-camera production. So there are some people who have something that they want to share, though, and if they're motivated and committed to do that, they can have a series program. It is difficult. I mean, it does take time. I mean, it's not doable. I mean, people do create programs, or they have in the past, and it is doable. But you have to have a little bit of a commitment. You have to be organized, and you have to plan ahead, and you need to reserve equipment or reserve studio time, and schedule your guests.
Well, I'm a prime example of that.
Exactly.
I've done nearly 100 shows here. On the schools, I did a show on the town. I've done various episodes of this Can We Talk? And I think there's something called the Simsbury View. I have an interest in tourism. I was on the tourism committee, but there must be other people like me out there. I'm not the only one.
I hope so, because we certainly don't want this to stop. I think that Simsbury is such a busy, vibrant community with so many different organizations, volunteer groups that have a lot to share, and wish that more of them would take advantage of getting their message out, letting people know what they do and how busy they are and who they help.
Right. So you're coming to an end.
Already?
Your time at SCTV. And I was wondering whether you had, looking back at your career here, some very gratifying moments.
One day, early on as the station manager, we had a visit from a gentleman who was coming back to town for a class reunion. I didn't know him. He ended up being a sportscaster, a newscaster in Pittsburgh. We didn't know that at the time. He came in, he told us all about what he was doing, and we said, you need to come back and do a little PSA promo for this, for students to realize that this is a great little sandbox to play in, to make things, to learn things, and to get, as he said, ahead of the game when he was starting college as a freshman. He said, I've sort of already been doing that. And I went to a conference once in Pittsburgh, and I went back to my hotel room and I turned on my TV, and there he was on the news. And this was the guy who had just stopped into SCTV a couple of years earlier. And I just thought that was really, it was just incredible.
Karen, we could talk for another half hour, but I see that we're running out of time. I want to thank Patrick Fallon for taking over as director, which is what Karen normally does. Karen is never sitting next to me. But before going, I want to especially thank Karen for the tremendous job that she has done as station manager, working always with grace and humor with the volunteers, the viewers, SCTV board members, and town officials, as well as tackling all the challenges of the ever-changing technology. We will miss you, Karen. I say that from the bottom of my heart. Now, if you missed any portion of this show, you can find it on our website at simsburytv.org, or you can watch it on TV on Comcast. It's on channel 1084 or channel 5. Or it's also on Frontier on channel 6069. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.